LSU football has had a pretty creative, has had a pretty good offseason with transfer portal, recruiting, and with spring football coming up. Brody Miller covers the Tigers for The Athletic. It has been a minute since we have checked in with Brody Miller. I believe we have him now, don't we?
Yes, we do. Up there. We do have him. He's waving.
To Brody Miller. Can he hear? You can obviously hear us.
He can hear us.
All right. Did we cross back over from phone to video from Kim?
All
right, Stewie. All right, Stewie. Let's go to New Orleans and talk to our boy, Brody Miller. Brody, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Nice. Doing good, man. There's a lot to get to since it's been a while since we've talked. And LSU has had a heck of an offseason, recruiting, transfer portal. They've lost some guys as well. Let's start with high school recruiting. Brody, what did you make of Brian Kelly's first cycle as LSU's coach now that National Signing Day, both of them, have come and gone? What did you make of the group that's coming in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you have a top 5 class, it's a win. That's a W, especially because that was such a doubt with him. I think every signing class, there's this every February, there's an element of there's always 1 or 2 guys you're going to miss on, or at least December, I should say. And then it's easy to get hung up on that but you have to step back and realize everybody's missing on a few guys, everybody's landing a few guys. So the Desmond Ricks thing kind of tainted it a smidge and losing some of those D linemen. Yeah, it's not a perfect class, but I think they did a really good job of, between both high school and the portal, getting younger at the cornerback room with Taviano and several other guys. I think they did a really good job there. I love what they did at edge rushers. So that next generation of edge rushers should be fantastic, quite frankly, between Womack, Howard, and so on. And obviously receivers a massive strength. So I think Brian Kelly and co did a really good job of kind of going national with this class, but still very much landing a good chunk of the best players in Louisiana. Yeah, I think it's a really good sign that this is his first real cycle. And they're, I think several staff members there will tell you they were very happy they were ahead of Notre Dame, for example, and things like that. So, yeah, I think they did a really good job this class. Obviously, I think they would like to have done better at D-tackle. I think they missed some guys there, obviously, and they would have liked to, finish your Ricks, but pretty good class.
Yeah, for sure. Now, they do some damage again in the transfer portal. They pick up some really key guys that can come in here and play immediately, like Spates at Oregon State and Denver Harris out of Texas A&M. What did you make of the work that they did in the portal?
Yeah, this is where I will give them all the credit in the world. I think 2 cycles in a row, I think they've just kind of knocked it out of the park in the portal, where they've done such a good job of, first off, losing 17 is a tough look from a distance if you're not too inside baseball. But at the same time, you go through one by one. Walker Howard, obviously that stinks. So there's not that. Walker Howard and DeMario Tolan are the 2 where it's you're not happy about those. Those aren't great, and you wish you could change that. But you go through it overall, it's losing those 3 edge rushers, Little, Carter, and Penn. That stink. You're oh, that's not good. Your depth's not good. But then you also have to sit back and realize I don't think any of those 3 guys were really starting at LSU quality at any point. I don't think that was ever really going to happen. You go down the list, there's a lot of O linemen who were the backup linemen, and everyone's coming back. You have a lot of, DBs who were just quite frankly never going to play much at LSU. So it's 17, but it's really 4 or 5. Excuse me, guys. Really 4 or 5 that you're oh, that kind of has to, Jack Bash, for example, you have to really adjust to. But there weren't massive losses, and I love what they did in additions, which is, one, they're so good, I think, at taking a step back, slowing down, and thinking big picture and not just patching holes. And what I mean by that is, okay, they knew they needed to get their D-tackle depth better. So they weren't chasing the biggest fish in D-tackle. They chased a lot of young D-tackles that have 2-3 more years of eligibility because they know they're not very young at D-tackle right now. Okay, those guys are going to help your depth there. Or corner, I'd give them all the credit in the world because last year they did a great job with all these juniors and seniors at corner, and those juniors and seniors had a heck of a year, won the SEC West. But those guys are gone. Now you have to do it again. This year, and I'm probably repeating myself, but they did such a good job of, yes, loaded, Deuce Chestnut, Denver Harris. Zy McDonald, just so many. Wow, I'm messing that name up. So many, Zy Alexander, Zy McDonald's at UL. So many guys that are just really good players, but at the same time, there's youth to it, and you added a good freshman class. So in theory, you don't have to do this at corner again next year, or really anytime again soon, other than maybe having to grab one. That's what you're trying to do. And then obviously Omar Spates is the biggest home run, arguably of all, where that's just the guy who was a day one immediate one of the better linebackers in the SEC at your biggest need. So I give them an A+ in the portal just because the way it's you're getting better right now and you're balancing to make sure you're better for the future. That's hard to do in the portal.
Do you have water close?
I do have water close. I will drink some water.
Water break. Water break. I've been there, buddy. It's a tough spot to be.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
It's a tough spot to be.
It's like I'm not sick anymore, but I just got that little phlegm stitch. You've been there. Yeah.
I got you. I know where you are. The Walker Howard story. What'd you make of it? Him entering the portal first and then ending up at Ole Miss. What do you make of this?
Yeah. It's tough. Okay. Losing a 5-star is always going to sting. And by the way, Walker Howard is going to be a really good quarterback somewhere. I know you were high on him, I'm like, he's going to be good. But there's two conversations you could have at once there, right? I think very much Walker Howard leaving is slightly a result of it being clear that Walker Howard probably would not be the starting quarterback at LSU for 2, hypothetically 3 years. When you are a talent of Walker Howard's caliber, you are probably not going to not waste, but you're not going to sit there for 2 to 3 years. That's just not normal in today's football. Now it stings because he is Louisiana 5-star, which like carries even greater weight because when you have a 5-star quarterback, we all know it, that there's a savior element to that. There is like you are the guy here to fix LSU football and you are ours. And I get that. It like hurts to watch that guy go. And by the way, it's going to sting when he does pretty well at Ole Miss, but I think him leaving probably wasn't the exact panic moment that it felt like, because it's just normal in college football. In reality, Garrett Nussmeier is probably the future there and a really, really good future. And you have more guys coming in the future. But still, I do think maybe some of that they could have handled better. I think there was some, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, everything I always gathered was he was going to TCU after that. I think it was so clear he was. And then I believe that, Garrett Riley going off to Clemson kind of changed that at the last second. And then Ole Miss ended up making sense. That is surprising then that they then, got Spencer Sanders. I think my read on that overall is the takeaway from that is Jackson Dart is probably just not the guy there. And I've never been high on Jackson Dart. I think even when they were 7-0, I was on your show being like, Ole Miss is not very good. And the second they need Jackson Dart to win them a game, they're probably going to show some weakness. And that's exactly what happened. They finished 8-4. So I think Spencer Sanders is probably there to be the starter. And I think Walker Howard is probably there to be the starter next year or moving forward. That is my personal read. Maybe Jackson Dart wins it over. Just like LSU, every quarterback room, you just want more competition. But yes, it is surprising to go there, then that room be that crowded, no doubt.
Competition for LSU at quarterback begins in spring, right? I know that Jaden Daniels will take the first reps, but this feels like an open competition going into the fall again, right?
Absolutely. I think Brian Kelly, I think the way he handled it post Citrus Bowl was probably accurate and a little informative, I think, in terms of he said Jaden Daniels is QB1. That is not up for debate. It is his. But then he said, at the same time, when you have 2 really good quarterbacks, you have to be open-minded. And I think that's relevant in terms of I still think Jaden Daniels will be QB1 come September in Orlando. I do think that. But at the same time, I do think it will be a very real competition. I think Nussmeier staying and Howard leaving, you have to read between the lines a little bit with that and wonder, okay, is it kind of clear Nussmeier is going to have a bigger role this year? I'm not saying maybe he does replace Jaden Daniels. Garrett Nussmeier is really, really good. But even more than that, is it going to be a little bit more of a 2 QB thing than it was last year? You saw in the Citrus Bowl how that could look. And I think it is not. I think Jaden Daniels wins the job because he's trustworthy. He's reliable. He's probably going to be better with a full offseason. But it's a real thing that Nussmeier's right there with him. I mean, that was a real part of him debating even whether or not to come back, Jaden Daniels, was like Nussmeier's on his heels. That's a real thing. So it's going to be a very legit QB competition. I think both guys are going to be sharing a lot of time in practice.
Staff changes, and not ones down here in Baton Rouge that are affecting college football over the weekend that have made headlines. Tommy Rees decides to leave Notre Dame. He's going to Alabama. Kevin Steele jumping ship from Miami and going to end up in Tuscaloosa as well. What do you make of Saban's last 2 hires?
Yeah, the Tommy Rees one obviously is shocking just for a few elements, right? One, you start with guy leaving one of the better jobs in college football and his alma mater to go to Alabama. But 2, it has been well documented that Brian Kelly very much wanted Tommy Rees here. And that was one of the first guys he was going to bring down. I forget the number, but they were about to make him the highest paid OC in college football at the time. That much I do know. And Tommy Rees said no. He was going to stay, kind of prove himself without Kelly. He was going to have the freedom under Marcus Freeman. It was like this, perfect utopia thing. And Brian Kelly was very frustrated at his kind of protege. He was angry at him. I mean, that's a reality. And for him to then, a year later, go to Alabama, I have no idea what Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees's relationship is now. I have no idea over the past year. I won't even pretend to. But, maybe they was like, hey, you should go take this. But that feels just so fascinating. Tommy Rees, I don't want to overreact to last year because Tommy Rees was one of the better young offensive coaches in college football. And I don't think that just means you stink after one bad year. You have to look at the big picture. So also, I think there were a lot of things working against that offense. Also, that offense got better as the year went on. Still, there is something about both that and Steele combined. I am the biggest Steele guy. I think he is one of the best defensive coordinators the last 10 years. Those Auburn defenses will never get the credit they deserve for how good they were those 4 or 5 years. But still, it just kind of feels like, all right, Tommy Rees had a bad year, and Kevin Steele, maybe not the sexiest hire in this day and age. But the thing I will always say about Nick Saban, and I think a lot of the best hires is Nick Saban is not flavor of the month. He does not hire based on what's sexy in the moment. He hires off compiling data and what works. And I think that's kind of what these hires are of. These guys are now underappreciated value almost because but they are really good. And I think you will see those guys will probably do very well. I think you will see Tommy Rees do well with that kind of talent with Nick Saban. And also simply I think Bill O'Brien just was not meant for the college game, and I think it was a really bad fit. Mm-hmm. And I think you will see an improvement in Alabama's offense with Tommy Rees. And Kevin Steele, we just know how good he is. I
agree with you. And I think Alabama's offensive coordinator role comes with a cachet that it's a very fast track to a head coaching job. Or at least
absolutely.
It's it's just a great stage for that. It'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. I would say that the quarterback storyline, obviously here in Baton Rouge in spring, is going to be something that we're all paying attention to from just a headline standpoint. What's some of the other bigger stories that are you're starting to pay attention to, or at least looking out for as spring's a couple of weeks away, which is wild to say?
Wow, that is actually really upsetting to hear that. Yeah, I think edge rusher is always going to be the thing I'm just most interested in this offseason because so much of the roster is stable in a weird way, right? Safety, you feel really good about. I mean, corner is going to be high on the storyline list as well. Just all those new guys. I think we talked about before once where I think corner will be super good. That's some elite talent in that room. But I think fans need to prepare themselves for it's probably not going to be as smooth of a transition as last year's corners were just because those guys were all 3-year starters, guys who just came in, Brooks, even Foucher's a safety, but it was guys who just very much knew how to play football at a high level. Bernard Converse, obviously. And I think this year it's going to be a lot of really good talent who are going to do some really good things. And maybe they're amazing by October, November. But it's a little younger, a little more a little more like your Denver Harrises who come with their own questions, things like that. I just wonder if it's going to be a little less smooth of a transition. So just be ready for that. It's not necessarily the end of the world. But edge rusher is, I think, what I'm just fascinated by because Deshaun Womack probably is the best actual option. But he's a freshman. You just always have to scale your hopes back 10-15% with that. But he might be the best guy. Braden Swinson, I'm blanking on how to say the name from Texas, but the guy from Texas probably is the day one starter if I had to guess right now. But at the same time, I don't know if Womack surpasses him the way we've seen with edge rushers so often at LSU where a Marcel Brooks is just, okay, you do something special. A Harold Perkins, you just do something special. I want you on the field. So I'm really fascinated by edge rusher this year.
Without question. The league, the SEC, the conference, what do you make of where it is and where it stands now? A lot of new faces on the sidelines that are now quite adjusted to their homeland. Where do you see the league kind of going into another year with the national champion being on the Eastern Division side?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia's obviously the top dog, and that's not changing. I do assume Alabama will be I just will always repeat, Alabama right now, there's not clear evidence for them to be amazing next year. But I just think they have the accumulation of talent. I think the coordinator changes might be for the better, and I assume they will get back to where they are. It's LSU has more evidence that they are the better team in the West. We have more we know, and I think that's totally real. But at the same time, Alabama, I don't want to just pretend they're not the favorite to win the West. But yeah, the SEC is in a weird place of I feel like the floor is just really, really high in the SEC right now. Now, the ceiling isn't as good as it's been the last, 10 years in a lot of ways where there's only one team I know for sure is good, really, really great. I'm not exactly sure what to make of the 3 through 7 in terms of how great they are, but name a single team in the West you're confident you're beating. Where Arkansas is flawed but super talented, and they have KJ Jefferson. Ole Miss, I'm actually really intrigued by Ole Miss considering they're bringing back more than I thought they would this year, and they have some good talent there. Mississippi State, that's obviously a shame with Mike Leach, and who knows what's going to happen with Zach Arnett. They're losing a lot of experience, but still, that was such a good team last year. So my thing with the SEC is the floor is just so high, and I think we're going to see a lot of 8-4 seasons and maybe not as much 10-2, 11-1 as we used to see, because it's just meeting in the middle quite a bit.
Yeah, without question. Brody, it's good to see you, man, and glad to hear that you're on the mend to health.
Thank you.
Stick on the water. Stick with the water.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
We'll talk again soon, man. Thank you.
Thank you as always, guys. Take care.
All right, there he is, Brody Miller from The Athletic, with just a small offseason update of LSU football here going into spring, a couple of weeks out, as the Tigers have a couple of storylines that we will be watching from a competitive standpoint. And obviously we will be checking in with Brody throughout that time to keep up with the latest. We're brought to you by Katie's Restaurant down in New Orleans. Remember, katie'sinmidcity.com, been around since 1984 with great selection on the menu there, including St. Louis-style pizza. Stop in today and see them on Iberville Street. It is a great taste of New Orleans. It's a great feel of New Orleans. It is the vibe of the city. Go check them out over there at Katie's in Mid-City. Scott Craig and the crew for the best, for always supporting us and always looking out for us. But if you go in there, you'll see the neighborhood feel. Everybody knows somebody. By the time you walk out, you'll probably know half the restaurant, too. It's got a great, just a great persona to it. Go check it out, katie'sinmidcity.com. On Iberville Street. We'll be back with more of the Culotta Show, driven and powered by Go Chevrolet.